everybody, it's Summit Searcher. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about the top 10 things to consider when starting your Adirondack high peak journey. I know a lot of people just do one or two of the high peaks. They do a Cascade and a Porter, or they do a Mount Marcy because it's so iconic. But if you're like me and you want to fulfill your 46er and do all of them, I figured that this could be a helpful tool and resource to you to figure out where to start. So my first key is that you need experience. So since May, I've hiked over 157 miles, and I've done a bunch of different types of hikes as well. So it's good to practice with long endurance hikes, so putting in longer mileage to see how far you can go. Also practicing with different steepness and elevation grades, practicing with different technical hikes, so scrambles, boulders, slab climbs, rungs, whatever you can to practice, because there's always going to be a different type of hike in the Adirondack high peaks that you're not probably prepared for. So getting as much variety under your belt before you start your journey is helpful so that you can feel more prepared when you do. My second key is that you need to have your supplies prepared. So you need to gear up to make sure that you have the correct safety equipment in case you were to be able to get stuck in the mountains or something was bad to happen. You never want the worst to happen and you never think it's going to happen to you, but you always should have the correct gear in case of the worst case scenario. You also need to make sure you have enough food. And you know, this is something that you kind of play with while you're on your Adirondack high peak journey. I always tend to pack more food than I need and I come home with extra. But kind of playing with the different snacks that help fuel you. You know, I use a lot of trail mixes, I use protein bars. I tend to always bring a sandwich. So kind of playing with what food you need to be able to withstand those long hikes. And you know, of course, depending on the season, you're gonna need more space in a backpack for all your clothing as well. Going right into the next one, number 3, is clothing. So like I said in the last one, it depends on what season you're gonna be hiking. But you always should have enough clothing for no matter what could happen, because in the mountains, the temperature and the climate and the weather conditions are always different than right on regular land. So making sure you have a raincoat, because you never know if there's gonna be a rainstorm while you're in the mountains. Extra socks is super key because it's very muddy in the Adirondacks. Having lots and lots of layers, just because of the fact that if you get cold at the summit and you're hot while you're hiking, which happens to me all the time, I'm in a t-shirt on my hike, but then at the summit I'm layered up with a coat and a hat and gloves. You got to make sure that you have all of the stuff that you need so you can be comfortable during your hike. And again, worst case scenario, that if you had to spend the night in the Adirondacks, that you have the proper attire that you would be able to be okay. Number 4, and probably one of the most important, is that you should do your research. Before I go on any high peak, I have done, not only will I look on all trails to make sure that I understand what the trail is going to look like, the route that I'm going to go, but I also read a lot of reviews about it. I'll read different people's perspectives. So some people hike counterclockwise of the route, some people do an out and back, some people do a loop hike. Kind of determining which route is best suited for me prior to getting on the trail. You don't want any last minute decisions because it can add hours onto your time. And if you're already hiking a 16, 18 mile day, you really got to be prepared ahead of time for what you're going to be doing. Number 5, speaking about looping, loop in multiple peaks. A lot of the things that are nice about the Adirondack high peaks is you start from a similar trailhead and the trails are similar and they junction off to multiple different high peaks. So once you've gotten your endurance up and you've been able to go longer and climb higher elevation, it makes a lot of sense to be able to do more than one high peak in your trip. And especially for ones where it's branching off, a lot of people don't want to have to hike the same trail in if you can avoid it. And when there's 46 of mountains that you're planning on doing, the more you can get in one hike, the better. Number 6, plan ahead. Like I said about doing your research is super important, but it's also important to make sure you plan how long you think the hikes are going to take you. You know, you may think you're going to be a 30-minute mile, but once you start hiking, it might give you about 45-minute mile or 50-minute mile or even an hour if it takes you a little bit longer. So make sure you buffer yourself with enough time that you're not going to be hiking out in the dark. Or if you are hiking out in the dark, that you've geared up enough that you have your headlamp and you're prepared to do so. You don't want to be rushing because that's when you make mistakes and that's when you can get hurt. Same with giving yourself enough time. Number 7, make sure you get there early. If you've ever hiked in the Adirondacks, you'll know that the parking situation is a nightmare. So you need to get there early to make sure you can get a parking spot. You know, some of the trailheads, if you don't park early enough, you'll have to park down the road, which doesn't sound like that big of a deal. But you're talking an extra mile or two at the end of your day. And if you've already hiked 18 miles or so, the last thing you want to do is hike 2 more miles to your car. So get there early. That also leads into the fact that, again, you never know if you're going to want to stop, if something's going to take you longer than expected. So the earlier you can start your day, the better. There's a lot of options for camping and overnights. I personally haven't done any yet in the High Peak region, but it's another option if you're not an early riser. Number 8 is consider the alternatives. Obviously playing devil's advocate on this one, but if you're not 100% sure you want to be a 46er or hike the high peaks, there's a ton of other options that offer you such great views of the High Peak region that aren't high peaks. There's so many people this year that have jumped on the bandwagon with COVID and started hiking the high peaks. So there's a lot more wear and tear on the trails in the High Peak region. They're just becoming overrun. So if you're not 100% certain that that's for you and that's something that you really want to achieve, look at some other options. I mean, right in the area, there's the Lake Placid Niner that offers some beautiful views over Mount Marcy and the Great Range. And there's just a bunch of options that you can choose other than the high peaks if they're not for you. And there's nothing wrong with that either. Number 9, and one of the most important on this list, is do your part and have a heart. Obviously, most people know no matter where you are in the world, whether you're hiking or not, you shouldn't be littering. Obviously, mistakes happen, but you're always seeing plastic water bottles, now paper face masks, food wrappers, all on the trails, and it's such a shame, and it's really sad to see. So please make sure that if you bring something in that you're carrying out with you. There's also a lot of rules in the Adirondacks outlined by Leave No Trace. It's lnt.org that you can find more information out about that. Please make sure to do your research ahead of time because you get a lot of people that don't have the knowledge before they go into the Adirondacks and are harming actually the environment, and they don't even know they're doing so. So please make sure to do your research. There's a lot of rules like not walking on vegetation and staying on the trails, doing the rock hop, so that you're making sure that you're not squishing or harming the vegetation on the trails because it's unique to that area. Camping above 3,500 feet is prohibited, so you need to make sure that that's something that you keep in mind while hiking and planning your overnights as well. Making sure if you go to the bathroom in the Adirondacks High Peak region, you need to be burying it in a hole. So considering those things prior to going so that you're not making mistakes and that you're not leaving a trace while you're on your hike. Last but not least, make your High Peak journey special. Everybody does it differently, and that's what's so unique about this hiking challenge is that, everybody does it in a different order. And there's only about 13,000 people who are 46ers in the world. So, it's a pretty huge accomplishment to achieve. It's not a race, and so I'm just going to enjoy each and every mountain that I climb and each high peak that I summit. And I'm really excited to share my journey with you, and I hope that you guys enjoy it as well if you decide to take these tips and start hiking the high peaks as well. Bye, everybody, and thanks so much for tuning in today.